according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
The same day, Sadducees came to Jesus, who say that there is no resurrection, and they asked him a question, saying, Teacher, Moses said, if a man dies having no children, his brother must marry the widow and raise up offspring for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers among us. The first married and died, and having no offspring left his wife to his brother. So too the second and third, all the way down to the 7th. After them all, the woman died. In the resurrection, therefore, of the 7, whose wife will she be? For they all had her as their husband. But Jesus answered them, You are wrong, because you know neither the Scriptures nor the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. And as for the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was said to you by God? I am the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living. When the crowd heard it, they were astonished at his teaching. But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together. And one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? And Jesus said to him, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments depend all the law and the prophets. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Please be seated for our second reading from Deuteronomy.
You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. And when the Lord your God brings you into the land that he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give you with great and good cities that you did not build, and houses full of all good things that you did not fill, and cisterns that you did not dig, and vineyards and olive trees that you did not plant, and when you eat and are full, then take care lest you forget the Lord, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. It is the Lord your God you shall fear. Him you shall serve, and by his name you shall swear. You shall not go after other gods, the gods of the peoples who are around you. For the Lord your God is in your midst, is a jealous God. Lest the anger of the Lord your God be kindled against you, and he destroy you from the face of the earth. The word of the Lord.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. This is the Shema. This is the prayer that is at the very core of Israel's relationship with their God. And it forms the foundation for what Jesus has to teach us as we move into the Gospels and the New Testament. That gospel story from Matthew that we hear read today, I read the whole big long piece because I wanted you to get an idea of what was going on. The Sadducees and the Pharisees, the religious leaders, the people who have education and experience and positions of power, they're the ones who are going out to test Jesus and to try and trap him. The Sadducees lay out this story. They don't believe in the resurrection in the first place, and so they're trying to prove that the resurrection is foolish. And they lay out this, hey, so here's the law. You know, God gave us this law so that we could take care of the women in our culture because they didn't have property rights and they didn't have employment rights. And so in order for them to have a place to live and food to eat, they needed to be in somebody's household. And if you were married, then you were out of your dad's household. But then if your husband died, whose household were you in? Well, you needed a new husband. I'm not saying that's the way it should be. I'm just saying that's the way it was. And so they come up with this absurd, ridiculous story. So what happens? Brother dies, brother dies, brother dies, brother dies, brother. 7 guys die, and then she dies. So whose wife is she when they go to heaven? Hey, dudes, maybe you should ask her that question. I don't know. Call me crazy. Maybe she should have some input into that conversation. Anybody agree? I mean, I'm just offering as an idea. That would be one thing we could do. Or perhaps your understanding of what it means to live in God's kingdom is limited by your vision and your understanding of what's going on here and now. Could perhaps this be a theme that we should come back to and explore? How limited is our vision and understanding of God's kingdom? Our series, More Than Sunday, focuses on how we can put our faith into action, how we can, in Paul's words, work out our salvation, live out our faith in the day to day. And in this gospel message that we hear this morning, we see this very clear imperative. Love God, love neighbor. Yes? Commandment number 1, the great one. Love the Lord your God. Jesus quotes Deuteronomy. He quotes the Shema. He explains Israel's fundamental religious precept to them in a new and enlightening way. Love God with all of your being, with everything that you are. And love your neighbor as much as you love yourself. I would suggest to you that Jesus does not combine these two things haphazardly or without reason. I would suggest to you that if you want to love God, then love your neighbor. If you would love God, love your neighbor. If you want to know what it looks like to love God, love your neighbor. If you want to show people the love of God, love your neighbor. Don't talk about it. Do it. It's really easy to say to somebody, I love you, right? They're just words. Hey, we can talk all day long, yes? Hey, do you like my sweater? Oh, it's fantastic. Oh my God, did you see that sweater? That was terrible. I can't believe she was wearing that. Hey, what do you think about this job that I did? Oh yeah, that was a great job, son. Way to go. Oh my gosh, we got to work on this kid. What's the matter with him? Words are cheap. Words are easy. Actions, however, Our world is filled with people who can talk all day long about loving God. Blah, blah, blah. I don't want to hear it. Don't tell me you love God. Show me. Show me you love God. Show me you love God by loving your neighbor. That's how you demonstrate your love for your God. Hey, coming to worship is good. I'm glad that you're here. I hope you'll come back. I hope that this is an experience where you experience the presence of God and you're fed in the sacrament and you're fed by the word and you get to pray and you get to praise and you find your place in God's community and it's awesome and wonderful and that's great. Are you loving your neighbor? Hey, if you read the Bible every day, way to go. That's awesome. You should. You should read your Bible every day. You should open yourself up to hear what God has to say to you through his word. It's important and significant, and it will change your life. Are you loving your neighbor? I know you love your family, right? I mean, you love those who are closest to you. You love those who are most important to you. You love those you like. It's easy to love people you like. You know, you come to me and you say, hey, I went to Texas Tech, and immediately I'm going to start loving you already because you're clearly one of God's favorite people. Easy for us to start there, but are you loving your neighbor? We can give and we can serve and we can worship and we can study and we can pray and we can do all of these things, and those things are all good. Hear me, church, those things are all good and important. But are we loving our neighbor? Now, of course, the next question that comes out of this conversation is, anybody? Who's my neighbor? Who's my neighbor? Come on, Jay. Who's my neighbor? Do you mean the people who live next door to me? What about the people who live across the street? Does that count? What about catty corner? Okay, next door and across, but not catty corner, because those people, like, really? I mean, you know, what if I live in a cul-de-sac? Yeah. How do we start measuring neighbors then? Is it just the immediate cul-de-sac? What about people that... Right, and of course, Jesus told us the story about that. He told us the story of the Good Samaritan, yes? Story about the man who's going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. He's beset by robbers and beaten and robbed and left for dead, naked and lying in the ditch. And he needs help, and a priest comes by and ignores him, and a Levite comes by and ignores him, and a Samaritan, an outcast, a half-breed, somebody who's not good enough, the B team, the loser of the bunch, he comes by and sees the man in need and stops and helps him and binds his wounds and clothes him and takes him to an inn and pays for his room and cares for him and feeds him. And Jesus says, who was the neighbor to the man? And everybody says, it's the Samaritan. And we take that to tell us that God's saying that we should love everybody just the same. It's a good thing. Loving everybody's a good thing. It's impossible, but it's a good thing. You can't love somebody you don't know. I mean, you can care for them. You can do things for their betterment. But really, to love somebody, you need to know them. I'd suggest to you that the story of the Good Samaritan doesn't mean that you need to love everybody. It means you need to be prepared to love anybody whom God places in your path. Don't give me a bunch of blah, blah, blah. I'm going to love the world. Shut your pie hole and love your neighbor and get to work and show me what it looks like to care for that guy who's beat up and lying on the ground. Love your neighbor. Don't tell me. Show me. This is what it looks like to love God. Yes, we worship together. Yes, we study and pray and praise and give and serve and work for the glory of the kingdom. And if we do not love our neighbors, then we are missing the entire point. This is God's call to us. How do we live out our faith? We love our neighbors, the ones whom God places in our path. At Grace Church, we have ministry partnerships. We've partnered with other organizations around us whom we can come alongside, that we can support and share in their mission. Monroe May Elementary was our very first mission partner. Way back in the beginning, we developed a relationship with them. They have a higher than average at-need, at-risk population, and so we asked them, how can we serve you and how can we help your kids and your families? And out of that has grown our Angel Tree Christmas Project and school supplies at the beginning of the year, and serving at the Monroe May at the carnival every spring so that we can help them raise money for the PTA, and we do all this. Out of that came Snack Pack for Kids. Snack pack for kids, where now we're feeding hungry kids every weekend. It's like 40, 42, 43, 46. Sharon says we're up to 46 kids that we're feeding on the weekend so that when they go to school on Monday morning, hey, guess what? They're not starving, so they can actually learn. Radical concept. Wow, crazy. Hey, if you're not super hungry, maybe you can pay attention to the teacher a little bit better. Oh, wow, nice deal. So Snack Pack is one of our mission partners now as we develop and continue to live out that mission. Taking it to the streets is still one of our mission partners. We haven't really engaged with them lately, but we're going to start doing that again this year. Taking it to the streets, the ministry where we go downtown and feed the homeless on a Friday or Saturday night. And not just throw food at them because they're hungry, but sit down with them and serve them and get to know them and recognize that they're our neighbors. We create these opportunities so that we can carry out this mission to love God by loving our neighbors. But if you think the church is the only place that happens, then you're not understanding what God is doing in the world. Every time you love one of your neighbor's kids, you're carrying out God's mission in the world. Every time you share in a community life, whether it's PTA or Boy Scouts or Little League or gymnastics or cheer or dance or band or choir or anything that's going on in the community, if you've got kids and you're in that school community, anytime you share in that and you bring the light of God and you choose to love somebody there, you're carrying out God's mission. Work? Anybody work? Yeah? Go to work, people at work that you don't like? Anybody? Yes? Maybe just one. Maybe just one. What does it look like to love your neighbor there? Every time you bring grace or mercy or patience or forgiveness or joy or peace into that work community, you're loving your neighbor. It doesn't have to be churchy to be godly. Never make that mistake. It never has to be churchy to be godly. What it has to be is lovely, because that's what God calls us to. How do you live out your faith on more than just Sunday? Jesus says you love your God with all your being. How do we do that? I say, love your neighbor. Telling God you love him is awesome. You should do that every day. If you're married, you should tell your spouse that you love him or her every day. If you got kids, you should tell your kids every day that you love them. If you got parents and siblings and friends, you should tell them often and every day that you love them. But don't just tell them. Show them. This is how we live in God's kingdom today. Amen. Amen.